For hundreds of thousands of years, human progress was bound by the physical limits of stone. That material barrier broke the moment an ancient craftsman watched a green rock melt into a glowing liquid in the fire. This discovery initiated the Chalcolithic period. Derived from the Greek words chalkos for copper and lithos for stone, the Chalcolithic defines a technological phase where humans first forged metal while continuing to rely on small, sharpened stone blades known as microliths. This diagram maps the chronological overlap of two different Indian societies. We see a continuous timeline of rural Chalcolithic cultures stretching from 3000 to 500 BCE, with the urbanized Indus Valley civilization appearing as a secondary layer occupying only a portion of that history. The material differences are stark. Chalcolithic communities lived in mud villages, while Harappan engineers built metropolitan centers on precise, gridded foundations of burnt brick. They possessed centralized infrastructure, like stone-lined drainage systems for public sanitation, which rural villages lacked entirely. Yet the Chalcolithic timeline actually frames the Indus Valley civilization. These rural communities existed during the pre-Harappan phase. They coexisted alongside the mature megacities, and they survived the post-Harappan collapse, outlasting the urban centers by centuries. This leaves us with a historical contradiction. The Chalcolithic communities possessed the metallurgical skills to supply an entire urban Bronze Age with raw materials. Yet, despite this technical capacity, they remained permanently rural. To understand why, we must examine the physics of early metallurgy. For millennia, tool-making meant knapping flint, striking stones together to painstakingly chip away flakes. Copper offered a novel mechanic. It could be hammered flat and repeatedly heated, a process called annealing, to achieve precise shapes. Neolithic stone tools are incredibly sharp, but they share a fatal flaw: brittleness. Strike a flint axe against a dense tree trunk or bone at the wrong angle, and the blade shatters. The labor invested is instantly lost. Copper behaves differently. Because it is highly malleable, a copper axe head that strikes a hard surface will deform rather than break. A worker can simply take a stone hammer and pound the bent edge back into a functional blade. This durability generated massive gains in labor efficiency, as tools rarely needed total replacement. It also meant that copper objects retained their material value across generations, creating highly sought-after recyclable trade commodities. As the use of copper spread, distinct regional cultures emerged across India. Instead of settling in massive floodplains, these communities actively sought out specific ecological niches, establishing their villages at river junctions and on hilly uplands. In southeastern Rajasthan, between 2100 and 1500 BCE, the Ahar Banas culture took root. The reliance on copper over stone was so complete that their primary settlement was anciently known as Tambavati, meaning the city of copper. Further south in central India lay the Malwa culture. Their major settlement, Navdatoli, sat directly on the banks of the Narmada River, an environment that supported the richest and most diverse ceramic traditions of the period. The ecosystem extended outward, reaching regional centers like Giland and pushing into eastern India, where settlements like Pandu Rajar Debi emerged in the river valleys of modern Bihar and West Bengal. In western Maharashtra, the Jorwe culture dominated. Some of their settlements, particularly Daimabad, grew so large they reached a semi-urbanized scale, complete with heavy fortifications. Chalcolithic India was a decentralized mosaic. Rather than enforcing a uniform city plan across the subcontinent, each region adapted its metallurgical and agricultural technology strictly to the demands of local soils and river systems. The architectural remains at Inamgaon track the shift away from egalitarian village life. Extensive excavations here reveal how settlement planning began to reflect social hierarchy. The layout reveals a strict hierarchy. At the center sat a large 5-room rectangular house next to a granary, allowing an elite to control agricultural surplus. Conversely, commoners were pushed to the periphery, their footprint restricted to small, single-room circular huts. The cemetery at Inamgaon confirms this divide was generational. Archaeologists found the remains of young children buried bearing elaborate copper necklaces. Because these children could not have earned these items through their own labor, this is direct evidence of inherited wealth. By tying resource control to specific households, the Copper Age effectively ended the communal living structures of the Neolithic, replacing them with a rigid spatial hierarchy based on material affluence. To sustain these growing hierarchies, the Chalcolithic people relied on slash-and-burn agriculture, a practice known as jume cultivation. They successfully grew wheat, barley, and in the black soils of the Deccan, they produced the world's first cultivated cotton. They domesticated cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs, but faunal analysis reveals a specific dietary limitation. The animals were slaughtered exclusively for their meat. There is no evidence that these communities milked their herds for dairy production. This map illustrates how the rural economy intersected with the urban Bronze Age. The Ganeshwar Jodhpura culture sat adjacent to the rich Khethri copper belt in Rajasthan, operating as a massive mining hub. From here, raw copper flowed directly into Harappan metropolises like Kalibangan and Banawali. In the Ganga-Yamuna Doab region, specialized smiths produced what archaeologists call copper hoards, large caches of heavy harpoons, swords, and distinct anthropomorphic figures exhibiting highly advanced casting techniques. In exchange for supplying raw materials, these rural miners acquired sophisticated Harappan pottery and trade goods, proving the existence of an active exchange between the village and the city. The rural supply chain provided the material backbone for the urban Bronze Age. While Harappans secured metals needed for their industry, Chalcolithic communities gained access to the specialized crafts and trade networks of the metropolitan world. Despite their geographic separation, these Chalcolithic settlements shared distinct cultural markers. Their artisans mastered the potter's wheel, producing a signature black and red ware, painted with precise white linear patterns. They also developed a unified spiritual iconography. Small clay figurines found across multiple sites indicate the veneration of a mother goddess, while stylized terracotta bulls point to a widespread religious cult centered on the animal. Their funerary practices were highly localized. In Maharashtra, the dead were buried directly beneath the floors of their homes, with their bodies carefully aligned in a north-south orientation, accompanied by pots intended for the afterlife. These shared artistic methods and funerary traditions provided an underlying spiritual cohesion that linked these isolated rural communities across the Indian subcontinent. We return to the central question: why didn't these sophisticated societies urbanize? The answer lies in 4 distinct material ceilings. First was the metallurgical limit. Copper is soft. Without access to tin, these cultures could not alloy their copper into hardened bronze, restricting the durability of their tools. The second ceiling was the agricultural limit. The sticky, black cotton soils of the Deccan Plateau are incredibly heavy. Without iron plowshares, farmers had to rely on wooden digging sticks weighted with stones, making it impossible to produce the massive caloric surplus required to feed a dense city. Third was the health limit. Excavations of Chalcolithic cemeteries reveal alarmingly high infant mortality rates. Rampant disease and malnutrition prevented the rapid population booms that drive urbanization. Finally, the literacy limit. These communities never developed a written script. Without accounting systems or ledgers, large-scale bureaucratic administration could not exist. Chalcolithic societies were trapped in a rural cycle. They had mastered their local environments, but the physical limits of their own tools prevented them from scaling up. The tipping point arrived around 1200 BCE, driven by shifting weather patterns. A severe, prolonged decline in rainfall made it impossible to sustain agriculture in the arid western regions, leading to the total collapse of sites in western India and Madhya Pradesh. In the eastern and southern regions, however, where red soil and different moisture patterns prevailed, the Chalcolithic cultures survived long enough to experience a seamless transition into the Iron Age. Iron shattered the old ceilings. With hardened iron axes and plows, farmers could finally clear the dense monsoon-fed forests of the Ganges Valley and turn over the heavy soils, triggering the second urbanization of ancient India. The Chalcolithic Age served as the agrarian foundation of the subcontinent, the first functional draft of Indian civilization that the Iron Age would eventually